The following program is brought to you in conjunction with the folks at Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now we bring to you the Agape Guy Show with your host, Lenny Manning.
I'm banking everything on love.
We now present to you the host of the show, a man with experience in teaching, preaching, and music ministry in several different types of church groups. He also has experience in alternative church groups such as house church and organic church. Here is author, speaker, and host of the show, Lenny Manning.
Hello and welcome to the Agape Guy Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. I've started a new series I call Understanding the Duns, Series 2. It's about reassessing our beliefs to find evidence that helps point us toward the truth and toward God and His love. Today, I'm going to be building on the last episode where we started reassessing the meaning of the word church. This is part 2 of this series within a series. For this episode, we're going to be reassessing community, or church community, or Christian community. Many people these days are saying we absolutely need some type of church community or some type of Christian community. So, do we need community? Is it something we absolutely must have? In what shape or style should we have this community? What should this community be like, or what does it involve? Wayne Jacobson talked about this in one of his recent podcasts. He said, quote, "Do I have community? Yes. Do I have a community? No, and that's okay." End quote. Many of us, like Mr. Jacobson, stay away from attending conventional church groups due to differences in ideology. Now, I'm talking about differences in ideology such as what church is and how it should function. So, it isn't always that people leave and stay away due to being hurt. I believe that we seem to have a mutated church system these days. It got mutated due to many bad circumstances in the past. The church morphed away from what it originally was. It also morphed away from the way it originally functioned. Most of that was due to the Roman emperors Constantine and Justinian and what they did. I'd also suggest we take care to look at a couple of issues with community to make sure we don't fall into some pitfalls. So here's a few things to think about. 1. Watch out to make sure your idea of church isn't based on the psychological condition of codependency or doesn't produce that problem. Make sure you avoid the unhealthy desire to be in a group, especially if people think that the only thing that brings wholeness to your life is being in that group. Be careful of having an unhealthy dependency on other people to bring you fulfillment and happiness in life. 2. Watch out to make sure the community group doesn't end up in a works-based system. Then again, on those same lines, make sure the group doesn't make you feel obligated to attend. That ends up in religious obligation, performance-based religion, and mere self-effort. 3. Make sure attendance isn't mandatory and the group doesn't take Hebrews 10:25 out of context to use guilt against you. I don't see anything in the Bible that says we absolutely must have a religious meeting. The type of church services we have these days didn't exist until a few centuries after the time of the original 12 disciples. So Hebrews 10:25 couldn't have been talking about attending a church service like we have these days. So we don't need to forcefully shoehorn somebody into something that isn't a good fit or something that isn't healthy or wholesome. 4, we shouldn't get people with PTSD from spiritual abuse and force them into something that causes more trauma. And 5, I also believe that Jesus came to set us free from mere religion with its religious rites, rituals, and obligations. So let's not go back to something that brings us into bondage that Jesus set us free from. So, I am uncomfortable with the idea that we absolutely must have a religious meeting. Remember that Wayne Jacobson said, "Do I have community? Yes. Do I have a community? No, and that's okay." So you see, as he mentioned, we don't need a community, as in a religious meeting. Now, should we have friends we can talk to? Sure, I think we should have friends to talk to, especially if they know about God's love, believe in God's love, and live from God's love. Yet I don't think we should be trying to force people into a religious meeting, though. Now, I don't say that to be unkind to anybody or talk down to someone who might still be in a conventional church. Although I might recommend you read some books on the matter, like Wayne Jacobson's books such as 1. The Naked Church, 2. Finding Church, and 3. Beyond Sundays. Many of us have been reassessing many things these days. These include the definition of church, God's love, issues about hell, etc. So I'm only saying it's okay to reassess some things and take an inventory of your beliefs. That way you can see what stands up to scrutiny. You can also try to find reasonable evidence to see if your beliefs are reasonably on the mark or if they're a bit off kilter. By the way, I don't think we should be forced to attend a weekly meeting at a house church either. I don't think we should be forced to do anything, nor should people use guilt to force others to attend. I would also say that I might prefer the category that some people might call spontaneous church or pop-up church. Those are even more informal than house church. I'd also say that we don't need a religious meeting to have community. If there are 8 billion people on this planet, then it's nearly impossible to escape having community or interaction with other people. If I go to the grocery store and say hello to the cashier, I had community and fellowship. If I go to purchase a fast food hamburger combo, I have interacted with someone who God loves and reconciled to himself. So we don't need a religious meeting because we are already permanently stuck within community. So we don't need to try to attain something we already have and cannot possibly get away from. Remember that ecclesia doesn't mean a building, a place, a meeting, an organization that sponsors meetings, or a tax-exempt organization. It's God's electorate. That's what the church is. And God has already reconciled all of us to himself. I love fellow Jesus followers who might believe differently, but I think we need to remember to avoid those pitfalls. We need to stick with Jesus' teaching that his followers shouldn't act as lords over others. I see nothing in Scripture that commands that we absolutely must attend a religious meeting. Those who demand that we attend a religious meeting get dangerously close to acting as lords over others. If you want to convince me otherwise, I'd suggest you read at least 2 or 3 books about it. You might also want to make sure at least one of the books has an oppositional or alternative viewpoint. I'd also like a lot of evidence, and not only one small piece of evidence that's debatable at best. And please, don't merely say, my pastor's been teaching this other doctrine for 40 years. Well, he could have been wrong all those 40 years. I've seen it happen. Then they go back to study more and find out that their point wasn't 100% rock solid. They might find that they were wrong the whole time. Perhaps they were looking at a Bible verse that was taken out of context, or they had misinterpreted it. Then, once they see the context in a good interpretation, they see their faulty viewpoint or faulty logic. If I don't see good evidence to the contrary, I might say what Martin Luther said. Here's what he said, quote, "Here I stand on Scripture. I can do nothing else. God help me." End quote. You might also want to figure out what type of packaging the church should be wrapped up in. Is it only to meet inside a building? Is it only to be found in a living room for house churches? That's something to think about. Maybe it's as Wayne Jacobson mentioned in some of his articles. He said, quote, "Church community is a group of friends with a shared purpose where God is helping them mature," end quote. That might not necessarily be a formal group. It could be, but it could be institutional churches, house churches, organic churches, emergent church, missional church, online church, spontaneous church, pop-up church, or any other type of group. I'd also like people to consider that if there's a mass move to leave conventional churches, it might be God doing something. It isn't necessarily that people are being rebellious or trying to defy God, the Bible, the church, or church leadership. It might be that God is trying to correct some things. Besides, if the so-called dones are done with attending a formal group, they aren't necessarily done with believing in God. You can see that in many polls, statistics, studies, and books on the subject of the duns. Some might mistakenly think the duns are in a state of agoraphobia, or they're afraid of going out into public, so they don't want to leave their house. Yet I don't think that's quite true. We can't escape and permanently get away from our fellow humans, so it's impossible to escape from community. So to say we need community is redundant. It's like saying, I wish I could be a human, or I wish I could exist. Well, that doesn't make sense because you already are a human and you already exist, so you can't get away from it. The idea of walking away from religious meetings isn't necessarily about the pain of abuse or being, quote, church hurt. It's a difference in ideology, the ideology of whether we need a religious meeting or not. If we do, what type of meeting and how is that meeting supposed to be carried out? How does the meeting function? How do the people function? What should leadership be like? What is the function of leadership? I think these need to be better defined first. Besides, it seems like some folks are trying to force people into an old wineskin that doesn't work. So it depends on what you mean by the word community. If community is just a religious meeting, it could be or could lead to codependency and excessive dependency on leadership. That type of unhealthy dependency on leadership could lead to an inability to actually live out your beliefs. It teaches you to merely sit down, shut up, and do nothing. If you think community is a religious meeting in a building, there's likely more community going on in the parking lot. That's what I recently heard Wayne Jacobson say on his podcast. Community is people interacting with each other and talking to one another. That type of community doesn't happen when there's a one-way lecture from the stage to the people sitting in silence. Here's what a friend of mine recently said in regards to most people's idea of community being a religious meeting. My friend said this, quote, "We can't go back to the way things were. It just doesn't work," end quote. Now, in that Zoom call conversation, he was clearly referring to trying to force people to attend a religious meeting. Those of us who are the duns likely aren't going back to return to status quo church as usual, or status quo attendance of a religious meeting. The more people try to force the duns to attend a religious meeting, the more the duns are going to be reluctant to attend. I can tell you that I've been outside of the institutional church for almost 20 years and outside of house church and organic church for over 12 years. Yet I've been interacting with Paul Gray's Sunday Zoom call group for about 3 years, I think it is. I can tell you that being outside of those big groups hasn't destroyed me or led me into evil behaviors. I have actually learned more, matured more, and been more willing to explore many other subjects. I've explored more about God's love, God's goodness, universal reconciliation, and if there's eternal conscious torment in hell or not. Some people say it's risky to leave the institutional church, yet I've found the opposite to be true. I've found that the institutional church chokes off spiritual life and stifles growth. I've also found much more life out in the wild, outside of typical conventional church groups. I've grown more and learned much more outside the four walls of a big box church building, no offense. If you're willing to do more research into this subject, here's a few internet articles that might help. 1. The Church Jesus is Building by Wayne Jacobson. That's on the Patheos website. 2. Why I Don't Go to Church Anymore by Wayne Jacobson. That's on his website, lifestream.org. 3. Why House Church Isn't the Answer by Wayne Jacobson. That's on his website as well. 4. Life Without Fellowship by Wayne Jacobson. That's also on his website. You might also want to look at other resources like podcasts and videos. Here's some that I liked. 1. Wayne Jacobson's podcast, The God Journey. Remember, the word the has to be on the beginning. It's The God Journey. And look for episodes 469 titled Of Lone Wolves and Free Rangers, and number 1005, The Traditional Congregation. 2. The second resource is that I'd recommend you look up the Agape Guy Show's YouTube channel and look up episodes of my series called Understanding the Duns. Look up the ones where I talk about whether church attendance is mandatory, which is Season 1, Episode 10. Then another one is where I talk about church leadership in Season 1, Episode 11. Number 3, the third resource I'd like to refer you to is a video series a guy did about church leadership. It's on Richard Jacobson's YouTube channel. Look up these videos. Number 1, do we hide from God behind hierarchy? 2, church, a hierarchy or a community? 3, the spiritual cost of church hierarchy? And 4, is today's church leadership backwards? The fourth set of resources I'd like to recommend is that you read some house church and organic church books. These books can shed some light on this subject. Here's the ones I recommend. 1, So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore by Wayne Jacobson and Dave Coleman. 2, Houses That Change the World by Wolfgang Simpson. 3, Simple House Church Revolution by Roger Thoman. 4, Jesus Has Left the Building by Paul Vieira. 5, The Church in the House by Robert Fitz. 6, House Church, also known as the House Church book, by Del Berkey. 7, Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola. And 8, Reimagining Church by Frank Viola. Now, I know some people might have concern about Frank Viola and Gene Edwards, and I understand those concerns. I do think Frank did a fairly good job in pointing out some legitimate problems in the institutional church. That's why I listed his books here. The fifth resource I'd like to refer you to is a few books by folks who study the trend of people leaving typical conventional church groups. Here they are. Number 1, Church Refugees by Josh Packard and Ashley Hope. And 2, Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore by Tom and Joni Schultz. The sixth resource I'd like to recommend is that you look at some alternative views on this subject. I'd suggest you read books by Wayne Jacobson. Here's my suggestion on which of his books to read on this subject matter. 1, The Naked Church, which is free on his website, livestream.org. 2, Finding Church, which is on Amazon's website. And 3, Beyond Sundays, that's also on Amazon's website. I strongly recommend reading at least 2 or 3 of the books in these lists, and watch a few of the videos I've listed. You might get a much better and well-rounded view of this subject matter. It might also give some good reasons why some people are concerned about these issues. It can also show some reasonable reasons why the Duns are uncomfortable with returning to status quo religious meetings. These resources might give you some good ways to overcome the problems I pointed out. There are good alternatives that can be helpful and more in line with what the Bible shows about the early church. They might also show some ways that are more in line with God's agape love. I'd also suggest reading Wayne Jacobson's series of articles titled Living in Relational Church. There are 11 parts in the series, and you can look it up in the search box on his website, livestream.org. Now, the early church had plenty of problems, and they weren't perfect as we count perfection. Yet I think if we live from God's love and avoid acting as lords over others, we can avoid many of those problems. Here's why I think it's so important to understand certain teachings and principles to help with this subject. If we get this stuff wrong, then the more we get wrong, the more off course we go, and the worse the situation gets. It also gets a lot worse over time as we get further off track. Most of these problems were from the church going off course about 1,500 years ago, so that's a lot of time to get worse and worse over time. It can be like being on a boat that got caught in a storm and the boat no longer has engines, sails, paddles, rudder, or a compass. We end up with no way to figure out how to get back to shore, and we have no idea what direction to go to if it's cloudy. Yet the closer we get to following God's love, the better our situation will be. Love is our compass and our powerful engine that moves us. My lesson here is that if we follow Jesus and Paul's ideas of God's love and goodness, it helps tremendously. If we add to or take away from those things, we end up with a mess and we get stuck in miry mud or quicksand, so to speak. Then we just can't function quite right. Yet it's not about a formula where we do steps 1, 2, and 3 and we get what we want. It's about God and His love nourishing us and keeping us thoroughly equipped. Then we no longer need to look for something extra because God's love and goodness is already all around us. If we traveled through time and showed the apostles the typical Western church group, I think they'd be a bit confused. I don't think they would understand what we were doing or why we were doing it. The things we do for a church meeting these days and things we do as Christians were foreign to them. The things they did are likely foreign to us as well. I think we need to get back to the things the early church believed and practiced so we can learn why they believed those things. We should try to build up one another as friends and not as forced religious rituals or mandatory gatherings. I think the apostles Paul and John would likely want to send us a letter to tell us to get back to following God's love and guidance. I'd also like to refer people to a couple of articles on the internet by a guy named Chip Brogden. The two articles I'm referring to are titled, "Is Jesus Enough?" and "No Fellowship, No Problem." I think people should read those and take a good long look at the points he makes and think long and hard about it. I'm also reminded of a letter Wayne Jacobson shared a few years ago. A person complained that Wayne should just openly declare the church to be corrupt, tell folks to leave, and list the reasons why. Wayne reminded the person that if he got adversarial, then church leaders and attenders wouldn't listen to him anymore. They would become steadfastly entrenched in their harsh stances and would write him off as an extremist. Wayne also commented that he agreed with the complaints about abuse from church leadership and various forms of corruption. Yet Wayne also mentioned that he knew of a kind-hearted tone would be more readily received. That's where love comes into the situation. So I'd recommend you don't confront church leaders with your complaints because it will only increase the hostility. That will only lead to heated arguments, hard feelings, and broken relationships. None of that will help the situation at all. I'd recommend that you leave quietly. I'd also say that if you disagree with me, it's okay, and I still love you. I still think there's plenty of enough of God's love in God's heart for all of us. I still love you folks who might still be in a typical Sunday morning church group. I hope you'll still love me too, even though I see things a bit different and don't feel led to a typical conventional church group. There are some people I disagree with, and yet I still like them personally, and I like their books, articles, and commentary on many subjects. I kind of think of it the way I used to think of people whose disagreements used to make me angry. I would get so angry and think my apologetic studies and books disproved most of what they were saying. Yet these days, I've read lots more nuanced material that help me understand their disagreements. I've even started to join some of them on their disagreements, mostly because a lot of their disagreements were based on seeing a lack of love in many church groups. I've also seen good reasons why we should reassess and deconstruct a few subjects these days. I mean issues like beliefs in hell, inerrancy of the Bible, and universal reconciliation. Sometimes it isn't just about the disagreements, it's about our attitude toward the disagreement and other people. When we get hostile and dismissive, we need to remember that we're acting that way toward people who God loves. You see, some people think they are so right that it gives them the right to talk down to people. We need to avoid that type of thinking and keep God's love as our highest priority. Well, my time is running out, so right now I'd like to leave you with a word of encouragement from Wayne Jacobson. This is from the book So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. Here's what the character John said to Jake's home church group. Quote, "As long as we see church life as a meeting, we'll miss its reality and its depth. If the truth were told, the scriptures tell us very little about the early church, how the early church met. It tells us volumes about how they shared life together. They didn't see the church as a meeting or an institution, but as a family living under Father." End quote. Those are words we all need to consider as we learn that the main goal is learning to live from God's love. That's the main goal. And it's the reason I use the word agape in the name of this show. I'd also like to quickly say that I have a private Facebook group for folks that have a lot of questions. They might be questions about reassessing their beliefs, deconstructing and reconstructing, or tough questions about the Bible. I made the group to help folks who are searching for answers, to help folks get a little bit of answers and maybe even some fellowship with each other. I think this group can be an encouragement as we try to focus on God's love. So on that note, I'm Lenny Manning saying, I hope to see you in the next episode of the Agape Guy Show. Goodbye for now. If you would like to help support the Agape Guy Show, you can get a copy of my book. The title is Journal to a Journey. My Life is More Than Wishes and Dreams. I give a lot of the details to show how God miraculously guided me to learn about His unconditional love. There were lots of ups and downs and some miraculous guidance. Let me show you a short video about it right now. What would you do if you had a dream where a glowing person told you to leave the church you attended? What if you then ended up learning about God's unconditional love and it forever changed your life? Learn about these and other miraculous events that guided one man's life. Read the new book, Journal to a Journey, now available on Amazon.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love. I see the flags unfurl and they're blowing the other way. I see the anchor rising and the ship moving away. I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love. I see the daylight break after a long sleepless night. I see them shield their